Hi, everybody. I'm Julie. I'm a compulsive overeater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the GreySheet. I write those meals down. I call them in to my sponsor, and I don't eat in between meals no matter what. Abstinence is the most important thing in my life. And I believe I've just told you the most important thing you can know about me. And I want to borrow a few phrases that I've heard today and yesterday on this incredible celebration. And the first is that I am ridiculously grateful. Um, I am ridiculously grateful to have a solution to my deadly addiction, and that my solution is so much fun. And I heard a woman say many years ago, I'll translate. If I were not a compulsive overeater, I would lie and say that I was so that I could come here and be a part of this thing and do what you all do. But I know that that wouldn't quite work because this is an honest program. But luckily I am, and I'm going to share a little of my story. And I also want to share some of the history. I'm feeling on this meeting that with all of you in the Spanish speaking community, I am your sister, even though I don't speak Spanish. And with all of you in the Icelandic community and in France and in all of the parts of the world where we might speak different languages or have a different culture, I am your sister in recovery, in GreySheet recovery. My abstinence date is February 11th, 1999. And I'll share a little of my story. And I first came to GreySheet in 1995 when I was 25 years old. I'm 53, and I have grown up in GreySheet. I got my first email account so that I could join the GreyNet when it began in probably 1996. And I got my first cell phone so I could begin getting on the phone meetings when those began around the same time. Um, I did not, a brief synopsis of my story is that I did not struggle with food as a child, and my addiction story really began with alcohol and drugs when I was 12. And by the time I was 20 years old, I had reached a low enough bottom for me, a serious bottom, that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and got sober. And thank goodness I've stayed sober since then. But for 1 year, when I was 16 years old, my father was doing research in France and took me with him. And that was the 1 year that I could not get drugs and alcohol because I didn't speak the language and didn't know anyone. And that was the first year that I compulsively ate. And it was just like they say, switching seats on the Titanic. I absolutely jumped from alcoholism to compulsive overeating, and I did that for 1 year. And then we came back to the United States and I began drinking again. And then until I reached my bottom and got sober in AA, I did not struggle with food. So my childhood and adolescence, I didn't struggle with weight. But the day I got sober, I began compulsively overeating, and I knew I had an addiction, and I knew what I was doing with food was exactly what they were talking about in the AA meetings that I was going to with sincerity. And so not long after I found OA, and I struggled in OA for about 4 years until the miracle happened. And the history that I feel privileged to be a part of in GreySheet is the Midwest United States GreySheet community. And I am a daughter of the Midwest GreySheet community. And that community began by two people. And the first was a woman who, a very small town in Kansas, which is a very rural state in our country, somehow got connected in New York in the 1980s and got GreySheet abstinence. And the name of her town, by coincidence, was Manhattan, Kansas. And she got abstinent, and a community formed around her of 5 or 6 or 10 people who had been struggling in OA and needed this solution, but just didn't know about it. And so she was doing this in this little island in the Midwest in a rural area. And then how I got connected was a woman from Cambridge moved to my town in Missouri, and she had 14 years of back-to-back Cambridge GreySheet abstinence when she moved to my town in 1994. And she had known about this other woman in Kansas, and they got together. And the distance between them was about 4 or 5 hours driving. And this all predated me even knowing any of these people. I was still eating during this. But they started meeting at a truck stop in the smallest town in Missouri you can imagine. And I still drive past this truck stop. It's called Betty's Truck Stop. And I imagine truck stops are all around the world because we all transport by trucks. It's not a fancy place. And they would meet in the parking lot and they would exchange abstinent proteins because one could not find the certain protein sugar fifth. And so that was all happening for years before I came. And thank goodness in 1995, I told someone in AA, I'm struggling with food and I'm not finding a solution in Overeaters Anonymous. And that person, he's still sober today. I sat in a meeting with him about a week ago. He said, you should meet Jane. She moved here from Boston and she has something around food that's different. And so I met her in August of 1995. She's passed away about a year ago. And when she passed away, she had 41 years of GreySheet abstinence. And I was very fortunate to be able to be at her funeral and be a part of her illness before she passed away and to help prepare GreySheet meals for her up till when she was hospitalized. I had that sacred honor. But Jane brought the GreySheet message, not just to me, but to a large group of binging compulsive overeaters in Kansas and Missouri who were going to OA and could not find a solution. And she moved here and the word trickled out in this rural region of this country that is my home, the heartland, as we call it in the United States. The Midwest we refer to as the heartland. And things got started and things grew from that little meeting of two vehicles at Betty's truck stop to I got abstinent. And then we started meeting in an AA house called the Bethel House. And we would meet there on Sundays once a month, and we would come from Kansas and Missouri driving. Jane had scoliosis. And I remember one time driving her in my beat up little old car, and she was laying in the back seat of my car because she couldn't sit upright for 2 hours. And we would go to this little AA meeting place in Kansas. And I remember one time a woman from the Manhattan, Kansas community brought her pants that she used to wear. And they were so big that 4 of us in our GreySheet abstinent bodies could have fit in those pants, 2 in one leg and 2 in the other leg. My story is that for the first 4 years, I got 2 different times of a year of abstinence, and I wasn't quite convinced. I had what Jane used to call the debating society. I wasn't sure I had it that bad. And so I'm so grateful I've had 2 kids in abstinence. I have one child who's 14 and one who's 10, and they have only known me following this recovery program. So I'm thankful that they need me. But when I went back out, I discovered I just reached a lower bottom, and thank goodness I got what Jane used to call GOD, the gift of desperation. And on February 11th, 1999, I came back to GreySheet. By that time, there was a thriving group in Kansas City, all from Jane and the Manhattan, Kansas group. And there were, I want to say 20 or 30 people sometimes in the meetings, maybe 20. And still today, I got to speak at Jane's funeral. And I was aware at the funeral, there was such a small attendance. It wasn't long after COVID, but I was aware how underrepresented we were at her funeral because Jane's community, and this is true for me, and this is evidence for all of us on this today. It's an international community, but people were not able to fly in for her funeral. And so I got to represent the Gray Sheet. And I said, one of the things I said at her funeral was that there are probably at least 10 people in Kansas and Missouri with over 20 years of Gray Sheet abstinence because of Jane. She was such a pillar of strength. And what it was just as I said, the GOD for her was that she had the gift of desperation. And when I came to Gray Sheet, she told me some things, and she encouraged me to call other people from Cambridge, and to reach out, just as we all do, to call people internationally and nationally, strangers to me, and introduce myself, and then to listen and to do what people said. And some of the things that I heard, the most important was that I'm carbohydrate sensitive, that I have an addiction to food, and that my body turns sugars, grains, and carbohydrates into alcohol, and that I can't safely eat those foods. It's an allergy. And I was told that we make our food delicious in Gray Sheet, and that's what I've seen at so many Gray Sheet retreats. And when I've traveled, thank you, 1 minute left, that I get to enjoy my food. And that's the irony. When my food is limited to the Gray Sheet, I don't just enjoy it, I love my food. But when I was eating every food under the sun, I couldn't enjoy a bite. And the other thing I was told is that we don't eat no matter what. And that meant weddings, even if the wedding is my wedding. And that meant funerals. That meant the greatest losses a person could experience, that we don't eat no matter what. That meant international travel. And it was possible. And I'm here to say that I've been able to live a very ordinary but beautiful life, and to not eat no matter what. And my hope is that that can continue one day at a time. And this experience today and yesterday has really expanded my spirituality, because I'm aware the program is always bigger, bigger, bigger than me, and the horizon is always growing, and it's wonderful. So I'm very thankful. Thank you to all of the service that went into putting this on and for letting me be a part of it.